In this video, we examine Machu Picchu based on archival photographs, which make it possible to assess the condition in which the site passed through centuries without reconstruction. This allows us to evaluate the reliability of the construction solutions that were chosen. In addition, these images provide access to viewpoints that today are impossible to obtain without special permission, making it possible to learn more about this remarkable architecture and to identify new details that were previously unknown to many. In one photograph, a fragment of a polygonal wall can be seen from an unusual angle. It is noticeable that only the semicircular section is executed with high quality. This is the only example of polygonal facing with extremely tight joints across the entire site. Characteristically, all other facings at Machu Picchu do not exhibit tight joints, and many masonry works, even in the central areas, are far from having flawless connections. The main temple during the clearing process clearly shows a significant soil level, indicating intensive soil formation. Even a rate of 1 millimeter per year results in 10 centimeters over a century. Large stones are also visible, apparently the result of the collapse of certain structures made of rough stone. The main gate differs in several characteristics from the polygonal style: the absence of block bonding, the use of small insert stones to adjust the level of a course, imperfect joints between blocks, and the lack of convexity. It is possible that the combined structural shortcomings affected stability, causing some blocks to shift. They have since been returned to their places, and chips appeared in locations where previously only cracks existed. The exterior side of the Temple of the Sun, thanks to high-quality masonry with inclined walls and a reliable bedrock foundation, sustained minimal damage, affecting only the window opening and a few individual blocks. Traces of this destruction can still be observed today, as they have not been subject to restoration. The entrance to the Temple of the Sun, seen from angles that allow an assessment of the height of debris accumulations, shows that they were quite substantial in this part of the complex. The level reaches the steps, stopping just short of the tower masonry. The appearance after clearing is also shown, differing from the present day only by the presence of a wooden staircase. The gates at the moment of discovery shortly after clearing work, and in modern times, are shown. The fittings for the presumed doors are clearly visible. No damage to the masonry is observed. The structure has passed through centuries unchanged, due to the impeccable polygonal style and strict adherence to construction principles. It can be noted that the uppermost course, which contains a ring, is executed in a different style. The lintel block is also not flawless, which may indicate that the original structure did not include a stone ring. A general view of the three-walled structure, the Inca Bath, and the Temple of the Sun with a damaged opening is presented. Photographs from half a century ago and modern images of the so-called bath are shown. This structure is an extraordinary construction of large blocks with niches, a waterfall, and geometric cuttings in the bedrock. It is particularly well observed from the window of the tower. Unfortunately, today such a photograph is difficult to take due to restricted access. The tower, viewed from the inside, shows serious damage resembling fire exposure. No similar destruction is visible on the exterior. At one point, blocks with elements of water channels were photographed at the base of the opening. These were later returned to their places. Notably, in this case, water would have had to circulate inside the walls, yet no outlets of the channels are visible. Attention can also be drawn to the fact that the placement and dimensions of the blocks do not correspond to drainage purposes, since the channels are oriented vertically rather than horizontally. This may indicate that these elements are not in their original positions. Images of the window opening of the Temple of the Sun allow observation of the exterior faces of the blocks with water channels, which remain accessible today. Numerous holes can be clearly seen in the blocks, closing off the previously discussed drains. The arrangement of these holes appears chaotic. They terminate without continuation in the form of grooves or collecting basins. A view of the rear wall of the main temple reveals, after clearing, an element resembling a door hinge. Unlike true door fittings, which are always covered by a block above and arranged in pairs on either side of an opening, this element is not covered from above. This may indicate that it was made after the wall was assembled. It lacks not only a pair but even an opposing wall where such an element could have been placed, and there is neither a room nor passage requiring a door. This suggests a different intended function. It should be noted that stone loops are quite common at Machu Picchu, and this element belongs to the same group. where, in the absence of a projecting part, the fastening was made directly within the wall. Intiwatana is shown from different angles, from the moment of discovery to the present day. This element represents a set of specific geometric forms, which correlates well with the huacas discussed in a separate video. Machu Picchu is the only complex that contains such expressive Intiwatana stones. Elsewhere, they do not exhibit such complex forms. At the Temple of the Three Windows, which was originally intended to have 5 openings, the damage is minor and mainly affects the gables executed in a different style. In one photograph of an opening, the inscription 1902 is visible, corresponding to the time of discovery of Machu Picchu prior to Hiram Bingham, who reached the then-known site. One of the gables, made of rough stone, was completely destroyed. On the megalith of the side wall, characteristic stone removals in the form of sequential grooves of approximately equal width and depth can be seen. Such traces are typical of ancient stoneworking and remain observable today, though they rarely attract attention. Several buildings were constructed only up to the midpoint with polygonal masonry, even though only a few more courses were required to complete them. This is a very strange decision. Instead of several half-finished buildings, it would have been possible to complete at least a couple of them fully. It is hardly appropriate here to speak of emphasizing a particular part of a building, since such a practice is not found in any other complex. They could not have been destroyed by an earthquake uniformly to the same level, nor could they have been dismantled. The Incas did not dismantle polygonal constructions. On the contrary, they maintained and completed them, as can be seen here, though already in a different style. A characteristic feature is the placement of bosses not in their proper positions, above the level of niches, but between them. Such a deviation indicates that the builders who continued the masonry did not understand the architectural canons of polygonal construction. It should also be noted that these bosses are not convenient for fastening wooden beams and have nothing to do with them. Beams are attached to elements projecting outward. The function of projections directed inward is clearly different. Unlike the previous examples, these structures were completed, but certain details remained unfinished. The lower part of a niche was not leveled, although this would not have required significant effort. This suggests that the niches were not intended as containers for objects and were an end in themselves. What is surprising is that nearby, the lower level of a niche is executed with an inserted block, meaning that additional attention was paid to the lower part, while these remained rough. Given the level, it is reasonable to assume that similar inserts were also intended here, yet we observe unfinished work. The same type of incompleteness can be observed at Huchu, where only some of the niches were fully completed. A series of openings shows damage resembling that caused by fire. However, here it is most likely the result of earthquakes, with the corner, as a load-bearing element, suffering more than other sections. A crack in the lintel is also visible, the most vulnerable element of polygonal constructions. The chamber beneath the tower with niches and an Intiwatana has remained completely unchanged over the years. Built directly into the bedrock, it is largely unaffected by time. It represents a typical Peruvian huaca, consisting of a set of geometric forms with fixed combinations in the mutual arrangement of planar surfaces. The purpose of such structures has not yet been determined and remains insufficiently studied. Views clearly showing wall capping blocks in the form of flat slabs spanning the width of the wall are presented. This solution protected the walls from moisture. In this form, the structure can be considered fully completed. Such completeness is rare for polygonal constructions in Peru in general and at Machu Picchu in particular, where one example of incompleteness, buildings constructed only to the midpoint with high-quality masonry, has already been discussed. In some cases, walls were covered with gabled blocks, which again indicates the absence of roofs. If a roof were present, it would perform this function. Moreover, how could a roof be installed over a triangular block, and why would such a block be needed at all? The tradition of covering walls persists even today and is carried out using reed. Polygonal facing serves as the foundation upon which buildings of rough stone were erected. In cases of polygonal construction, the opposite pattern is observed, both at Machu Picchu and at other sites, where high-quality walls are built upon foundations of partially fitted blocks. The reverse sequence may indicate that these buildings were not part of the original design. Structures near the upper Intiwatana appear quite harmonious today, but at the time of discovery they were severely damaged. Judging by this, the reconstruction preserved their original forms as much as possible, and they can be considered authentic. However, they differ stylistically by having a larger number of window openings and smaller block sizes, which affected their stability, since reliable bonding with such dimensions is practically impossible. One of the three-walled buildings at Machu Picchu is unique in many respects. The bosses above the niches do not correspond to high-quality masonry and cannot serve any fastening function. On the opposite side of the wall, however, the bosses are in their proper places. Obviously, the same element performs two different functions, which introduces confusion in interpretations. An opening for a possible water channel is visible, which directly indicates the original absence of roofs in the design. A water channel is also present in the companion building of the main temple. A place for beam placement is visible, though unfortunately it cannot be determined whether it was originally planned or resulted from the removal of several blocks. To determine this, the upper part of the masonry must be seen, where traces of connections should remain. In summary, it can be said that the polygonal buildings of Machu Picchu, with some exceptions, have passed through centuries in their original form. Restoration has affected them only minimally, making it possible to study the architectural features of dry masonry with extremely tight joints based on authentic material. Thanks for watching. See you next time.